Good evening. I hereby call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, February 25th. Would you please stand and join in the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will note that we are still operating under the public health emergency meeting guidelines pursuant to Governor Holcomb's executive order, as well as corresponding guidance from the Indiana Public Access Counselor. I will also remind my colleagues calling in to please mute your microphones when you're not speaking to minimize any feedback or interference. Mr. Bernlohr, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Pritchard.
Commissioner Pritchard here.
Commissioner Slack.
Present.
Secretary Collins.
Here.
Vice President Moore.
Here.
President Hawkins.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Bernlohr. Moving on to section 1.03, adoption of the agenda. I will note that we have two items that have been added to the agenda since our agenda review session on Tuesday. Item 5.01 under board reports is an agenda item required to make statutorily required appointments to our audit committee. Item 802 under new business has also been added. This item is the school year 21-22 school calendar that comes before the board for approval. I know our families are wow, I guess I messed that up there. I know our families are eagerly awaiting the adoption of this calendar. I know okay, so with those additions, upon reviewing the agenda, are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is adopted. Thank you. Moving on to section 2, special recognition, specifically 2.01. We do have one special recognition this evening. As president of the IPS School Board of Commissioners, it's my honor to recognize the years of work and dedication of Zachary Mulholland and the service that he has provided to the Indianapolis Public Schools School Board, as well as the IPS community. As many of you are aware, Zach has moved on to a new role from his role as board administrator. However, this is not a goodbye for Zach, as he is remaining with IPS as the executive director of operations. I think we can all say that we've been pleased with Zach's time and service in partnership with the IPS School Board and Team IPS as well. So just for those that don't really recall, Zach began as board administrator way back in April of 2015 and has been an indispensable member of the team since then, and has been essential to the efficient functioning of the board, as well as keeping us informed, keeping us up to date, and he has continued to meet that challenge every day during his term as board administrator. And so we're incredibly grateful for your service and your work, and we want to thank you for that, Zach. We know you spent countless hours, nights on phone calls, but we know that that was all for a good cause, and we know that as well. So again, we want to thank you, and at this point, I also just want to lift you up and thank you one more time. Again, I keep thanking you, but I also want to see if there are any commissioners that want to offer any comments as well to our friend Zach, who is not leaving, but is simply moving, I think, to a different floor in the Ed Center. Commissioner Arnold.
I've had the privilege to work with Zach during his entire tenure as our board administrator. I interviewed him for the position and recommended his hiring to the full board. Upon meeting Zach, I was first impressed with both his intelligence and his compassion for the children we serve. He has a wonderful mix of humor, patience, humility, diligence, and highly honed organizational skills. While I'm sorry he's leaving us, I'm glad that he will remain with Team IPS. I'm confident that Zach's leadership on the very difficult transportation issue will keep the safety of our students as the highest priority. I wish him well in his new endeavor and am thrilled that he will now be able to put his talent and effort into strategic efforts to improve the educational opportunities for all of our students. Good luck and God bless Zach.
Commissioner Collins.
And on a personal note too, Zach Mulholland was always so kind and informative. And I want to thank you, Zach, as a newbie on the board. You were always so supportive. You always had the information that I needed and then some. And it seemed like there was no time of the day that you couldn't be reached. So that accessibility, the kindness, and you're a tech grad. And I thought that was very cool since my daughter was also a tech grad. So I want to thank you, and I too am so glad you're still on Team IPS.
Commissioner Moore, please.
Say I salute you for all the work that you did. When I came on the board, you were always there for me. You've always been able to provide me with the right information, and you kept me from always going wrong. So for that, I truly do appreciate you.
Commissioner Howland.
Yes, Commissioner, Zach, I appreciate all your service to the district. I know that I haven't had an opportunity to work with you as long as some of my colleagues, but I will say that since I have been on board, you've made it a very easy transition. I really appreciate the support that you gave me as a new commissioner. And the inside joke, I thank you for not hazing me on my first meeting.
Commissioners Pritchard and Slack, don't want to leave you out of this moment of recognition for Zach. Love Fest, as Commissioner Arnold would say.
It's Commissioner Slack. I would like to say thank you, Zach, for all your hard work and your dedication, especially for always getting my order correct for my vegan meals. I really appreciate that. You're always accessible. So like Commissioner Collins said, whenever we came on the board, you welcomed us, made sure we had all of our policies in line. You never let us miss a beat in our executive sessions, and you always told us we were dragging our feet. So I really, really appreciate your honesty and your support with us, and I wish you well in your endeavors, and I'm happy that you're staying with us.
Zach, this is Commissioner Pritchard. I just want to say thank you very much for helping me transition to the board. You never let anything slip through the cracks. You always followed up diligently and provided a lot of detail around anything that I wanted to ask about. So I really appreciate that, and I know you've been really dedicated to the community for a long time. So thank you for that service as well, and good luck in your new role.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, Zach, as a representation of our appreciation for all of your hard work, we would like to present you with a plaque. And so, if you wouldn't mind, if you would join Superintendent Johnson and myself up front, we'd like to present you with the plaque. All right, so moving on from the Love Fest to Section 3 of the agenda, opening comments. Does any commissioner wish to open or offer any opening comments this evening? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 3.02, which is public comments. To minimize the risk of exposure from members of the public sharing the same microphone at the podium, we will continue to receive public comment through our online portal. Please note that we are closely monitoring all relevant public health data and are absolutely seeking to incorporate greater public input to include an in-person public comment as soon as medically advisable. The public comment portal was activated on Friday, January 29th, and remained open, February, and remained open until 4 p.m. today. The board did receive 12 public comments submissions. These comments were posted and were shared with commissioners via email, but were also posted on Board Docs Agenda Item 3.02. Moving on to Section 4 of the agenda the consent agenda, are there any requests or questions related to the acceptance or removal of any items on the consent agenda? So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? All right, Mr. Bernlohr, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Commissioner Pritchard, yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore, President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bernlohr. Moving on to Section 5, Board Reports, specifically 5.01. There's one item in this section of Board Reports, as previously mentioned. Item 5.01 is the reappointment of 3 members to the Audit Committee as presented in your materials, Commissioners. Are there any questions regarding the reappointment to the Audit Committee? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 7876 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? Mr. Bernlohr, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen. Yes. Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard,
Commissioner Pritchard, yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Moore, President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bernlohr. Moving on to Section 6, I will now turn the agenda over to Superintendent Johnson for superintendent reports.
Thank you, President Hawkins. There are 5 superintendent reports to be presented this month. Item 6.01 was presented on Tuesday evening, and we are very thankful and appreciative that Inez Evans, the CEO of Indigo, was able to join us on Tuesday evening. Item 6.02 is our school spotlight. Principal Kathy Louse, who serves as the school leader at Russo McClellan School 91, is here with us tonight. So I would invite her to the podium at this time to share about the amazing things happening at her school.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Johnson, school board members, and guests. I am Kathy Laws, and I have with me our assistant principal, LaShonda Huff, and we are the proud administrators at Russo McClellan Montessori School 91. Oops, sorry. Tonight we will be sharing information about who we are, our initiatives or our big rocks for the year, and some of our current data that is showing the impact of our work, as well as some of our celebrations.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of short. At McClellan Montessori, we are a peaceful school community where every child is valued, prepared to lead, and challenged to make a difference in the world. We are a pre-K through 8th grade building. We have multi-age classrooms. We have pre-K and K students together. First, second, and third grade is our lower elementary. Upper elementary consists of 4th and 5th grade. Our 6th grade is our standalone grade, and we also have middle school 7th and 8th. In addition to our general education classrooms, we have 3 classrooms for the self-contained autism program that are included into our general education program.
We asked a few of our students their thoughts about this school year, and these were some of the things that they shared. And in Montessori, we do call our tasks and materials works. So you can see that that's one thing that Kenneth likes about this school year. And Ruby likes playing with materials. And in Montessori, everything is taught from the concrete to the abstract. So the materials that she's talking about, you'll see our younger students using those throughout the day. So overall, you can see that our kids are happy to be back together and seeing their friends. We also asked them if there was anything they would change about this school year. And so you can see that their changes are mostly COVID related. But if you'll notice that last comment from one of our 7th graders, we plan to keep that on file so that when they're complaining, the middle schools are complaining about being back in school full time, we're gonna be like, no, wait, look, see, you wanted this. This is what you wanted. But overall, the kids are just wanting things to be back to what they consider to be normal. So our 3 big rocks this school year are listed here. And our motto, pre-pandemic and even through the pandemic, is that every child, every day. We want each child to get what he or she needs each day. And some days that's academic, and other days that's more social emotional. Our main goal was and is to take care of our students and to make sure they have the supports needed to feel safe in this part of their brain, the amygdala, to feel loved in this part of their brain, the limbic system, so that they are ready to learn in this part of their brain, which is the frontal cortex. We do this by getting to know our students and building really strong relationships with them and their families. And we also have daily community circles in our classrooms. We also want to take a look at everything through a racial equity lens and not have that be separate work. We have a school racial equity team that meets regularly, and we have put our staff into small groups that meet weekly to examine our own implicit biases and how those are playing out in our school and in our classrooms. Ms. Huff has helped us create a discipline flow chart, and we recently partnered again with the Peace Learning Center for some professional development on equity circles that we're able to use with staff and with students. We've also been looking at our Tier 1 instruction and creating common work plans.
In the past, we had a large discrepancy in our discipline data, and we have seen an improvement in this area. We have a lot fewer referrals this year. Some of that is due to students being remote, but our discipline flow chart has helped with that as well. Our data is beginning to mirror the demographics of our school, and we are continuing to focus on meeting the needs of the whole child.
So another way we're seeing the impact of our work is through our panorama survey data. This is the data from our fall survey, and we saw an increase in all student areas, and most notably a 19 and 20-point increase in teacher-student relationships in grades 3 to 5 and 6 to 8 respectively. We have also seen an impact in our NWEA data. Here's the data from the winter of last school year to the winter of this school year. And we have seen an increase in both English language arts and in math. This is a percentage of students who met their projected growth from last year to this year. And while we held fairly steady in English language arts, we did see a decline in math. And I was looking at that and thinking about that, we feel that that's mostly due to Montessori math being taught through the concrete materials. And we know that, so much of it's hands-on, and that's been challenging to do in the remote setting and with our current safety protocols. But we've been continuing to find ways to make sure our students have access to materials whenever possible, including creating individual paper materials for our students to use both in person and remotely. So our goal was and is to take care of our students, and we feel we are doing that. We continue to follow the Montessori philosophy of focusing on the whole child, and even during these different times. Our data shows our students are learning and growing, and most importantly, we're all still here and collaborating and figuring out the best ways to support our students. We will continue to build strong relationships with our students and ensure we continue to live our motto of every child, every day. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioners on the phone, Commissioners Pritchard and Slack, any questions for our guest speaker this evening? Guest speakers, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Slack.
Go ahead, Commissioner Slack.
Hello. Thank you for coming and thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask a question around your staffing. About how many of your teachers are lead teachers are African American descent, are mixed, are Latina?
For our classroom teachers, we have two lead teachers who are Black, and then we have one of our special areas teachers who is Hispanic.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I follow up on that question?
Commissioner Moore.
Out of the total of what?
Oh, out of our total, we have 24 classroom teachers. So that has been an area that we've been focusing on to increase our diversity in that area.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Slack, didn't know if you had any additional questions.
Yes, let me follow up on that question. Sorry. I want to extend that question. When it comes to, you said leads, how many of your teachers that are second teachers do you have that are of African American descent or Latina?
So I think you're referencing our classroom assistants, just to make sure. Yes. So we do have a larger population of our assistants who are Black or African American. And so we've been looking at that and trying to find ways to make sure that we're representing our students in all roles in the school so that they're not seeing that disparity between our lead staff and our classified staff.
Okay, and with that question, about what would you say your demographic was again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it because I was on the phone. I couldn't really hear you. Could you give me your demographic again when it comes to your students?
The students' demographics? Yes. 49% white, 26% Black, 16% Hispanic, 9% multiracial, and we have less than 1% American Indian and Asian combined.
Okay. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you. I think that, do you guys still have y'all's dog out there at the school still?
I couldn't hear that.
Commissioner Slack, can you repeat that?
I said, last time I visited a long time ago, you guys had a class dog that went around to everywhere in the school. Do you guys still have that dog?
No, Lily, the therapy dog, she belonged to the previous principal, so we no longer have her, but yes, but we did have fish pre-pandemic, but we're petless at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking how great it would be for our kids that deal with a lot of trauma, and how good it would be coming back from COVID to see a dog in their classroom. So thank you for your presentation again. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Collins.
Thank you for your presentation from both of you. I'm curious about the teacher certification in Montessori practice. Is this something that's difficult to find, or do you just take someone who is interested in either the new teacher project or whatever, or coming out of a university, and then teach them the Montessori practices at the school? How do you address that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Montessori certification is a 2-year program that would be in addition to the teacher training program. So we most of our staff, most of our lead teachers do have the Montessori certification. We do have some staff that do not have it yet, but we're working on getting them certified. So we will hire staff that have that the desire to learn what we do, and because so many of our staff members are trained, they're great resources for that while they're going through that process. And to your question about being easy to find, so there's a lot of online options, of course, popping up even more now with our current situations, but to be in a program that's in a certified program, there has to be an in-person residency piece. So there has been some challenges around that, making sure we have locations that are convenient for our teachers to attend. We've partnered with one organization that brought the residency here to Indianapolis for us. So that was great. So we try to find locations that will partner with us in that way, and then work with the local Montessori community to make sure we give them plenty of people in that program.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arnold.
Can you tell us a little bit about parent engagement, how that works, and also community partnerships that work with your school?
Sure. So we have a really strong parent community. We have a really strong MPTA, our Montessori PTA, that's very supportive of what we do. We usually, in a typical year, would have, if you were to come visit on any day, you would see lots of volunteers in our hallways. Of course, that looks different this year. We've not been able to do that, but we have a lot of support from our community. And we think that, being a choice school and families have to make that choice to come to us, that helps with that piece, right? That they're involved with that. We've had various community partners. We've partnered with Regions Bank, and they've always been a great support for us. They'll just be like, what do you need? How can we help? And we've also done some partnering with them with junior achievement and some different activities for our kids as well.
Commissioner Moore.
So can you talk to me a little bit about how you're dealing with parent engagement now at this point in time during COVID?
Yes, so we have weekly principal chats virtually through Teams where anybody can join and just have questions, and Ms. Huff and I are both on there, or they can give us feedback, or just to have that, as face-to-face as we can be right now and have those connections. We also send weekly newsletters to our families, and we stress constantly how we're reach out to us anytime. We try to be really accessible. And so we've also had some parent education things through our PTA. Next month, we're having Dr. Payne come and speak at that event. So we've been trying to have some educational events through that source as well. So while it looks different that they're not physically in the building, we're still trying to keep them engaged and involved.
One more question. Okay, when I go to slide number 9. Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm looking at this correctly. So we're saying that in 2019, those of our students was at proficiency level was 52%, and now 60.8% for this year. So you're not really seeing a gap, a dip in our children's learning over this period of time. Is that what this is saying to me?
Right. So we're seeing a slightly higher percentage of our students who are considered on grade level or proficient in their proficiency on NWEA. Right, so we feel like we've held pretty steady there. We did see that dip in the growth data, specifically in our math, but as far as our proficiency, yeah, we're seeing that we're staying pretty steady.
Okay, so that should be something good, right? Okay, so I'm like,
we are proud of that.
I want to go back and say, I want you to speak up for yourself. I think that's pretty good, and because we are concerned about the gap that we think our children may have because of COVID. So,
yes.
Do you have any ideas? Can you tell us? Do you have any ideas why you think you've been able to maintain the level that you have?
Yeah, I think we have a couple of things working in our favor, and one is that we have multi-age classrooms, right? As we mentioned, so some of our kids a lot of our kids were returning to classrooms that they were already in last year. So that's a big help right there. I also think that we knew going into this that our goal was we want to make sure we're providing kids what they need. We want them to feel safe. We want them to feel loved so that they can learn, and we approach everything from that lens. So I think we're seeing that pay off. We're continuing to build those strong relationships with our kids, just connecting with them and getting to know them so that we can best meet their needs.
congratulations on what you're doing as
you.
relates to that, and say that I have a very good love for Montessori because my daughter did Montessori, but only up to the 3rd grade because then she wanted to be able to do whatever she wanted to do forever.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, well, Principal Laus, thank you very much for the presentation. I do want to say that, and again, echo Commissioner Moore's sentiments and kudos on the movement from 52% to 60%, because, to Commissioner Moore's, her observation is right. Most trends out in the world go the other way, and so that's remarkable. Going to slide number 10, though, you mentioned sort of growth, where there was a little bit of shift. There's a little bit of a difference in gap in the slide, or the difference, right, between ELA and math. Math was a greater sort of gap there. As you think forward through the end of the year, into the summer, what are the areas of focus that you're seeing that you and your team really need to dig into to really sort of restore those gains that were made in the prior year of 1920?
Yeah, so specifically with math, like I mentioned, we realized that because so much of Montessori math is that hands-on piece, right? And that's challenging. But we've come together, brainstormed, figured out how we can replicate materials as much as possible so kids have access to those. So that's part of that. I also think something that we do in math is we jump from that concrete to the abstract, like we skip some steps in between, right? Because we're like, okay, they're ready, and we get them there. So another area that we're focusing on as a staff is like, how do we make sure we're getting those middle steps, like those picture representations to help them before we really let them free in the abstract. So we're making sure we're being really thoughtful about providing those experiences for our students as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. Appreciate your time and all the work you all have done through such an incredibly challenging year. So thank you to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, we will move on to item 6.02, which is an update on our district response to COVID-19, as well as the federal stimulus funding that we will have access to as a result of December congressional action. So I'll invite Andrew Strope, who's our Chief Strategy and Planning Officer, to make this presentation at this time.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Good evening, Board of School Commissioners. And so this evening, we are going to provide an update on COVID-related initiatives and a few data points on where we are as an organization. And then we're going to spend the majority of the time working through an overview of the Emergency Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER. And so that also referenced as CARES 2.0 or stimulus funds. A lot of conversation about that nationally, and so we will provide the framework for how we are thinking about making decisions in terms of how to utilize those funds. So to start with the COVID update, so since returning to school in mid-January, we've had 169 positive cases and 636 students and staff in quarantine. And that has led to 18 instances where one or more classrooms had to be moved to remote learning. So again, that is essentially transitioned back in January. This table goes into a little bit more detail with the positive tests. And so you can see staff, student, and then the total, and then is broken out by grade configuration, again, equaling 169 positive tests. That was as of last week when we pulled the data. And then here is the data behind the quarantines. So again, we've had a total of 636, 150 with staff, 400 plus with students, for a total of 636. Again, that is since we went back in January. And so as we think about vaccinations, this slide, when we put it together and uploaded it on Friday, Marion County has currently transitioned, I think, to the next phase, which includes eligibility for Hoosiers, I think 60 and older now. And so that has been updated since we've posted this deck. How that impacts IPS, obviously our colleagues that are 60 and older are now eligible for vaccination, and then our special education staff who provide specific assistance to SPED students are also eligible. And we have got a tremendous amount of information on the website where our staff can go to learn more about vaccinations and actually sign up and learn how to register. a few updates as the CDC has been releasing updated guidance over the past couple of weeks. So that first bullet point there, quarantine is no longer required following a close contact if vaccinated and the following criteria are met. And so that just goes through 3 bullet points there. Again, this is impacting our protocol at the school level, which is why we are raising it here. And then from a mask reminder perspective, we are consistently reminding all of our staff on the importance of wearing masks and how they should fit, and the N95s being the best case scenario there. I think I looked today, and our positivity rate in Marion County is at 3.8%. And so, a lot of that is a noticeable trend downward from our conversations that we've been having as a community over the past couple of months, which is great. And so another item here is a part of a statewide distribution. The Indiana Department of Health is going to be providing IPS with some N95s. And so we are looking forward to that and are thankful there. And so transitioning to attendance and where we are, Dr. Morgan, our Chief Academic Officer, presented this information last week. But as we are looking at attendance here relative to the past couple of years, the third column there where we have been year to date in 2021, and then what does it look like since we've been back in January? And so we've seen a noticeable trend upward, which is a testament to a lot of work that our schools are doing. And then looking at average attendance by learning community. And so this breaks it out with IPS as a whole on the left, and then cascading to the right, how our learning communities with K6, K8, high school, transformation zone, secondary, innovation are doing. And so now as we are going to transition gears just a little bit here and talk about the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. I will call it ESSER from now on, so I don't have to say all that. So what is it? In December of 2020, Congress set aside approximately $13.2 billion for ESSER. And the Department of Education has been in the process of awarding these grants to state education agencies and then on down to LEAs like IPS, including charter schools. And so these emergency relief funds are meant to address the impact that COVID-19 has had and will continue to have on the elementary and secondary school space. And so what this table does is it articulates what are the guidelines of ESSER and what is the impact on IPS. And so I wanted to show this in relationship to really what was ESSER number 1, and that was the CARES Act. And so on the left-hand side of this column, going through what is the period of funds, how long are they available, that is very, very important to understand. What is the allowable use of the funds, and then what is the impact on IPS. And so that column in the middle, that is the CARES Act. That is what we received over the summer. And as you can see, we received about $17 million for IPS and LEA. And we have been using those dollars. And I think we've given a number of updates to the board on the use of those. And that has been mainly utilized for technology, transitioning us to one-to-one, as well as PPE. And we've actually spent well above that $17 million over the past 10 months or so. And then where that red arrow is, that focuses on ESSER 2. So these are the dollars that are coming down the pipeline that Congress passed in December. And so when we think about the period of fund availability, what is really important to note is these funds are available for obligation through September 30th of 2023. So in other words, we need to identify what they're going to be used for and use them up through September of 2023. So in other words, it's like a grant. So these are not going to be funds that, and Weston will talk about this a little bit more in the budget development update, and it's also noted there at the bottom and underlined. These stimulus funds are going to be utilized to promote the investment in learning acceleration and some other items. But in terms of addressing structural deficit issues or recurring costs, that is not what this is for. And so we will still have some tough decisions to make as it relates to our structural deficit. So this is, again, a really important point. You'll hear it from Weston, you'll hear it from the superintendent as well. When we think about allowable use of funds, These are funds are to address learning loss, preparing schools for reopening and testing, and then to upgrade projects and improve air quality in buildings. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that is playing into our prioritization. And then what is the amount? So the IPS LEA, we are set to receive about $79 million. And then IPS Innovation Charter Network Schools, about $18 million that will go directly to them. And so what I'll talk about now is how are we thinking about prioritizing the investment of those dollars. And so if we can remember, we've had a number of conversations as a board as we got ready for the start of school year this year. We had 3 non-negotiables that we use for our planning that we talked about over and over and over again. And so we're actually setting this conversation up in a very similar way. And so first starting with our strategic plan and our values. And so as we think about how we're going to utilize these funds, make sure we start here first, which is our values: students first, racial equity, continuous improvement, integrity, and community. And then, of course, our strategic plan priorities, there are 4. And so we are talking more and more about these over the course of the year. So increase access to rigorous curriculum instruction, promote racial equity, foster authentic engagement, and operate and fund strategically. And so really these serve as the foundation of how we are thinking about utilizing these dollars. So now to connect some of this to data, Dr. Morgan shared this slide last Tuesday in the board work session. And where are we from what has the national impact been on COVID? And so this is an NWA, which is an interim assessment that we utilize here in IPS as well. It's utilized nationally, and what the trend has been nationally, is reading. Most students have showed gains in both reading and math, but there's lower gains in math, and so that is consistent with what I think you saw as well with the previous school that just presented. And then from an IPS perspective, again, our trajectory follows that national trend. But when we think about NWA, which we just finished taking over the past couple of weeks, this looks at our trajectory over the last couple of years. So starting, for example, in math in 2019, this is the percent of students meeting growth expectations. You saw a little downtick from 19 to 20 when COVID hit. And then again, as we're seeing across the nation, that number has gone down even more as we had transitioned to remote learning and just the impact of COVID. And you've seen a larger trend downward in math, again, which is very consistent with what we're seeing across the country. So I wanted just to set the stage there from a context perspective. So in addition to those academic challenges that we have, we also want to note the continued impact of COVID on student and staff safety. So knowing that will change and evolve as we head into next school year, and are very excited about vaccinations and how those are rolling out. However, we will absolutely still need to be planning to prioritize student and staff safety for the 21 and 22 school year. As I mentioned, we have this $18 million budget shortfall, which is driven by enrollment loss that we are addressing, and then that tension between using non-reoccurring revenue to address a structural deficit and wanting to make sure we protect the investment to benefit our students. So in other words, utilizing the stimulus funds for non-reoccurring items, for non-reoccurring items so we can make sure that we are ensuring that we are keeping these sustainable. So therefore, what are our guiding principles as we are working through how to utilize these dollars? So number one is we want to make sure we prioritize investments in student learning needs. That aligns obviously to our strategic priority 1. And so I'll go in more depth on each one of these in upcoming slides. Guiding principle number 2 is offset increased costs associated with just doing school in the context of COVID-19. So that is, continued investment in IT infrastructure, as well as the safety of students and staff. And then number 3, make new investments sustainable by avoiding initiating recurring costs. So again, just continuing to note that with these additional funds coming in, because we do have to spend them by 2023, adding additional FTEs or additional staff, that is not sustainable. And so that is something that we have to make sure we're planning for. So going a little bit deeper in terms of this prioritization framework, again, number 1, first and foremost, is investment in student learning. We're going to break that down by looking at 2 elements of that. The first is the short term. So what is the learning acceleration, those short-term initiatives that we can invest in to really promote acceleration? And then number two, what are those long-term, and really thinking about that over the course of the 5 years of the strategic plan, those supports to strengthen Tier 1 instruction. You've heard a lot of Dr. Morgan and Dr. Henderson's thoughts on academic strategy and how the big bets they're making. So we'll tie some of that to bullet point number 1 there in just a minute. And again, that relates to strategic priority 1 and 2. And then second, evolve the IT infrastructure for 21st century learning. And I'll talk more about that in an upcoming slide. And then invest in facilities and operational costs and prioritize those investments to promote student and staff safety. So again, this is how we are thinking about prioritizing the use of ESSER dollars. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with each one of these tiers. And just to note, these are potential initiatives. So what we're bringing to you tonight is the framework. And I'll talk about next steps in terms of how we're going to go through kind of decision-making and cost estimation over the course of the next couple of months. This just provides an overview. So as we think about Tier 1, again, what's most important is investment in student learning. 2 tiers of that intervention. The first is the short-term learning acceleration needs. And so what might that look like? High dosage tutoring, Saturday academies, summer school. There's a tremendous amount of research that has been, in particular with the high dosage tutoring and Saturday academies, if done right, that can really accelerate student learning. And so we are off and running in terms of our planning for that over the next couple of years. And then when we think about the long-term Tier 1 instructional supports, that's a lot of what you heard about last Tuesday with Dr. Morgan and Dr. Henderson. And so that is really continuing to invest in our curriculum and then making additional investments in professional development for our staff as they internalize that, in particular, that ELA curriculum. And then Dr. Henderson also talked a little bit about launching that CT3 program at emerging schools. So as we think about our school improvement strategy, how we can partner with organizations that really will support the build out over time of instructional excellence at our emerging schools. And so those are just some of the potential initiatives that we will utilize the ESSER dollars for that's related to the Tier 1 investment in student learning. So Tier 2, invest in IT infrastructure for 21st century learning. And so I'm going to focus a little bit on this first row there, which is move the IPS network to a 21st century data infrastructure. And so if we can remember back, I think it was September, when we had a line that was cut during construction that essentially put us off the internet for about a day, and we had to go to asynchronous learning. That is, we did not have redundancies created to ensure that if that happens, something like that happens, we can, just transition to something else and everything will be fine. And so we've done a lot of analysis there. And so we will look to some strategies there, like we could move the IPS network to the cloud, move the IPS network to a data center offsite to create those redundancies. So again, as we think about the continued involvement of one-to-one learning and just how important that is moving forward for teaching and learning, that investment in IT infrastructure is going to be massive. And so we would want to utilize ESSER dollars most likely to do that. And so we're in the midst of planning for what that could look like. And then refresh school and central devices to support 21st century learning. So as we made that huge shift to one-to-one, we purchased thousands of student devices, got that up and running. Obviously, there are recurring costs there that we'll have to build into the budget. One of the things we'll also need to get up and running is the staff devices. And so we do yearly refresh, IT refreshes for staff. We are a couple years behind on that, and so we're going to propel that forward. And again, that is exactly what these ESSER dollars or stimulus funds are for. And so that will also be incredibly helpful for the organization. And then when we think about Tier 3, there are 2 elements of this, and this is invest in facilities and operational costs. And so the first is just, as we think about student and staff safety heading into next school year, continue to cover the PPE cost there. And so we've got a team, including Scott, our COO, that currently auditing our current PPE supplies, and we'll continue to do that over the course of this year so that we can see what we need to invest in moving forward. So the mask, hand sanitizer, all those protocols that we have in place now that are keeping our students and staff safe, we will continue to do that. And then as we think about air filters, which I think we're in pretty good shape there from a building perspective, there's a continued investment we can make in some restocking of filters that are currently in buildings. So essentially just to restock, make sure we've got those on hand should we need them. And then the second row, and Scott can talk a little bit more about this if there are questions, but what we are looking into is, since a lot of our buildings are a little bit older, not all of them are on a centralized, controlled system as we think about our utility usage. I think there are about 14 schools. And so we could actually move those to being controlled centrally and then continue to cut down on our utility cost. So obviously there's a cost to moving those 14 schools onto that program. And so we would consider utilizing ESSER dollars to do that. And so those are just a couple of examples of what the tier 3 bucket could look like when we think about facilities. So just real quick, how will we account for spend at the IPS in LEA and innovation schools? So obviously as this gets pretty complex, we've broken this out by tier. So again, our tier 1 is, and what is most important, is investment in student learning. So as you can see there, the pass-through plan to our IPS in LEA innovation schools would be just convert dollar per pupil rate based on estimated costs and then pass this amount through to the innovation schools. And then you can see how this would be addressed in tier 2 and tier 3. So I won't go into a little bit more detail there, but it's on the slide if you need it. And so as we think about next steps, so again, that was just a framework. Those were proposed initiatives. Those are things that our team are really starting to work on and run down and to really make sure, again, that they're aligned to our values, our strategic priorities. And so what's happening next? Number one is cost estimations. And we've got a pretty good handle on this already. But when we think about things like potentially moving our data center to the cloud, we'll continue to look into how much that might cost and can come back with estimates there over the next number of months. And so we'll put all that together and see how that shakes out, again, $79 million. Also to note, we just got feedback from school leaders. So my team is running the analysis on that right now just to make sure we're in close contact with them in terms of our prioritization framework and what their needs are in the buildings. And then Superintendent Johnson, runs advisory groups, parent and community, student and partners. So we've already had a number of conversations with those advisory groups where they have given us tremendous feedback that you see play out in our prioritization framework. And I want to make this last note. We want to ensure that the continued alignment to our values and priorities here to prevent oversaturation. So $79 million is definitely a good chunk of money. And so thinking about just how much capacity do we have as an organization, in particular at the school level, we don't want to just all of a sudden just flood the space with all these new programs and new initiatives and new strategies where it just gets to be so much that you can't implement any of it well. And so that is why it's so important to have the framework that you just saw, and we're going to continue to keep that top of mind as we're planning to ensure that we are focused on what's most important, and then we ensure that we have the capacity to implement this really, really well over the next couple of years. And so that is all I had. I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. I'm going to begin with commissioners on the phone, Pritchard and Slack. We'll just go in alphabetical order with Commissioner Pritchard. Do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you. No.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioner Slack.
I have a comment about slide 22. Point out that I am so happy to see that we're addressing the urgent learning acceleration needs that we have in our students with the enrichment program, like Saturday academics and summer school. And I'm just interested to see how this is going to play out with our Tier 1 instructions and support. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Moore.
Just following up on Commissioner Slack's statement, can you tell me and I'm sorry if it makes me look like a bad commissioner, but what is a high dosage tutoring? What is high dosage tutoring? What is that?
Yeah, I can initially respond, and then Dr. Morgan or Dr. Henderson, I'm sure, can add on to this. And so there are a number of different ways to do high dosage tutoring, but what the research plays out and shows, and what I have seen in work that I've done in the past as well, is if you are incredibly intentional about coherence between what your core curriculum is, and then you add on additional time to that through tutoring to students who really need it, and you create that through line, then you can get you can accelerate learning in a pretty big way. And so that high dosage really just means it is incredibly intentional and aligned to what kids are already getting throughout the day. And then essentially what that does is just add additional time for learning opportunities for our students. And so there are a number of ways, we can do that, and that's what we're looking into now in terms of partnering with local universities, et cetera, to, give us some additional capacity to execute that. But that's what high dosage. I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arnold.
I just want to thank you. There's a lot of work, a lot of information, and I think what pleases me is that some of the work we've been doing on strategic planning and looking at what we need to do as a district, regardless of getting these resources, are integrated into that. So I'm glad to see that we're not doing things in a vacuum and getting money over here and doing it, but we're using the funds to further our strategic planning and efforts to improve the district.
Andrew, thank you for the presentation. I guess I have a couple questions or questions maybe. One is just thinking about, from previous presentations, we saw that attendance and enrollment, there was, those were challenging during this COVID season. So I was curious if there had been discussion or feedback from school leaders or as administration's thinking about this, how we might deploy resources to go out and find children and families and connect with them with the resources that they need to come back to school in a more consistent way. Just was curious if that had been thought out or considered as we go forward.
We actually do have a recruitment planning group that's been meeting, so I don't know if Christian or Jamie want to talk about some of those efforts.
Sure. So as Superintendent Johnson mentioned, we have started to meet to think about, from an enrollment perspective, how do we empower schools to, be in the communities and advertise to their communities and really market themselves. I think we see that a lot with our choice programs and with charter schools across the city, but it's not as much of an emphasis on neighborhood schools, and we want to start to shift that paradigm a little bit. I think from an ESSER perspective, we haven't discussed using these funds. We think about that, I think as Andrew mentioned, we want to make sure from the ESSER perspective that we are using them in a sustainable way. And so when we think about the student recruitment strategy, that's something that we do want to be able to sustain for a long term. And it's less related specifically to COVID learning loss and more to how we need to be thinking about sustaining our enrollment over time as a district overall.
I appreciate that. I think just to clarify, I think, this money is finite. It will end in September of 23. Maybe there's an opportunity for another round, but I kind of defer to Dr. King's, fierce urgency of now as we think about students that have been lost. And this isn't just an IPS dynamic. This is a citywide, statewide, nationwide matter. And so just hope that we consider how we might aggressively, proactively really try to go find students that we know that are out there to bring them back home. Thank you for that. I think I'm also encouraged by the technology infrastructure. That was a dark day in September when we lost connectivity, and I know that was no fault of ours. It was just the reality of construction downtown and infrastructure. But seeing how we've moved to this platform of one-to-one, it's encouraging that's a long-term sustainable shift that I think is important to make as we think about our system going forward. The other thought, comment, question I have is relative to just thinking about schools have different needs, and I get that there's a framework here that we're starting from. We're going to have more conversation, with our community, with our leaders. But just thinking about their needs are very different at a school level perspective. And so I'm just curious, as principals are engaged, and we might learn that resources need to go here a little bit more than there because of need. And I'm thinking about our equity work, et cetera, as well. I have to assume that's part of our process and part of our algorithm as we think about appropriation of resources to schools. Will they sort of will they complete an application or define that need quantifiably and say we need X, Y, and Z, and then that'll be vetted and sort of submitted? I'm just curious, like how you'll think about that allocation process, whether it be through the lens of equity, through the lens of academic gains, through the lens of whatever, and then that appropriation process, I guess, is my question. Maybe it's early. That's okay.
Yeah, I think all the above on that. What I would say is I think that's a great question. We will get into that in particular as you think about like the short-term learning acceleration. I think the long-term, and I'm just again focused on what's most important, that's investment in student learning. That long-term, the support and strength in Tier 1 instruction, that's embedded in our strategic plan and what Dr. Morgan, Dr. Henderson in particular are already building out. And so, in terms of like, how, explicit schools would receive some of those academic strategies won't necessarily be dependent on ESSER. It'll be dependent just on what our strategy is in general. And so I think that's a great question. We'll continue to kind of play that out in terms of, how we think about allocation. But that's kind of how we're thinking about it at this point.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. Item 6.03 is an update on our 21-22 budgeting process, and that will be presented by Weston Young, an update on just that budget development. But before I turned it over to Weston, I did want to share a few words related to the budget and where we are financially. So first, I'll share where we are. As commissioners are well aware, it's been an incredibly tough and challenging year. COVID has hit our country, our community hard. Our district has been no exception to that. Our expenses are up and our enrollment is down by about 4%. And so that combination has created the $18 million budget shortfall that Andrew spoke about that we need to deal with quickly. And that has exacerbated the timeline for financial deficits that we've been projecting now for multiple years. And while we have received some federal relief funds, which we are very thankful for, those dollars are restricted and, as again was mentioned, cannot cover our long-term needs. The original CARES dollars we received over the summer were vital for those new challenges we faced. Everything from masks to touchless water fountains to thousands of laptops and iPads and mobile hotspots that we provided to ensure every single one of our students had access to high-quality remote learning. And the additional round of federal stimulus that we just discussed will be just as vital as we prioritize those dollars for learning acceleration, for modernizing IT, for ensuring that we continue to have safe school environments for our students and our staff. But again, those are restricted funds. They're for a short amount of time. They won't cover our long-term needs. As you'll hear and as we'll talk about, and as I wish our referendum that we passed in 2018, the wish would be that would be the solution. It's not. Those funds and the ask that we made, which was reduced substantially from our initial ask, has been specifically dedicated to things like safety upgrades in our buildings and compensation for our teachers. And I am thrilled that we offer competitive pay. We are at near the top of the Marion County list in terms of beginning pay for teachers. Our teachers deserve all of that and more, but that fund and those funds will not fix the shortfall that we face. And beneath all of this are some very troubling actions by our state. About 50% of our budget comes from the state, around 15% is federal funding, and about 35% from local property taxes. The state has played what I would consider a little bit of a shell game with the funds sent to us. Some funding lines increase while others decrease. And the bottom line is that while the average district in Indiana has seen a 15% increase over the last several years, we've seen a net increase of 0. Some wealthy districts are up, but that has not been the case for Indianapolis Public Schools, where about 2 out of 3 of our students live in households that endure financial hardship. That is not equity, it is not right, and it is disheartening to me as a parent of IPS students and as the leader of this district. So as we continue our conversations with state legislators, we call on them as they continue their budgeting process to change the approach from equal to equitable, including creating a priority for funding for students who are English language learners, as well as for students who are experiencing homelessness. I believe that we understand the importance of living within our means. We've been responsible stewards with the funds that we've received as a district, and we will continue to make sure that every single dollar benefits student learning. But the reality is that we, the administration and this board, are going to face some hard decisions in the coming months. It's often said that budgets are a measure of our values. We work very hard to ensure our budget aligns to our values and our priorities, and we ask our state legislators to recognize the value of our children by supporting the efforts that they put into their learning every single day. So I will turn it over to Weston to continue to give us context on those concerns and on the issues that we face.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Good evening, commissioners. We've had a chance to talk about budget development for next school year, one time in the work session in February, and this is an opportunity. We're going to dive a little deeper into the state funding. It's a timely event because of the legislative session, and then also the federal funding update, which was outlined previously through the COVID-19 update. The first slide we want to highlight is a slide we have had in the quarterly finance update, but really the takeaway here is that when we're talking about state funding and federal funding, we're talking about certain percentages of the revenue that come in. And so when we talk about state funding, historically over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been in between 49 and 53% is our state funding. So just think about 50% of our budget, revenue-wise, comes in from the state. And then the federal funding that we've highlighted through title and food service historically has been about 12 to 15%. So what Andrew shared previously is going to be on top of that as a federal fund. So we're going to see these percentages shift and change over the course of the next few years. But generally speaking, 50% of our budget coming from the state and about 12 to 15% coming from federal. The second slide I want to highlight before we get into the details is a slide that we've highlighted again numerous times in our quarterly finance update. It's the historical trend of our state funding. A couple takeaways that we continue to highlight. One is that this school year, 2021, we're receiving 1.5% less than what we were in 2010-11. The second thing is that even for $7,250 to come 100% of the way to IPS and many other states, districts, there is still legislative action that's needed. And there's a bill that's passing through, it's being expedited, and we're on the path to have 100% funding for our students, no matter whether they were in person or virtual. The third piece is the state revenue projections being better than anticipated, and then the hope for some modest increases at the school levels. So when we dive deeper into what makes up that historical IPS per pupil, this is something that highlights the foundation amount and the complexity amount. And foundation amount is an amount that is given to every student in Indiana, no matter of need. And then the complexity amount is based upon the need of a student. And that percentage or that complexity index has shifted and changed over these years. What you see here is that the orange line has increased, that foundation amount has increased over time, and that complexity line has decreased. I have the dotted line in these graphs and charts to represent, these are projections, and they're projections based upon reality, which is the 2023 school formula that was released on February 11th, 2021. If you have any interest in diving deeper into those numbers for our district and many other of the other districts and charters in our state, you can click on that link and learn more. When we look at the shift and change of foundation and complexity, what it represents is about $960 of increased funding for foundation, yet $944 less in complexity, basically a right pocket, left pocket. And when we look at the increase over that time, again, for rounding purposes, $17 of increase over that time frame, 2013-14 to the projected 2022-23. And during that same time, the Indiana average is averaging $865 per pupil of increase. In percentage terms, Superintendent Johnson has highlighted that $865 per pupil represents 15% of increase for an Indiana average per pupil increase, where IPS has had a 0%. Yes, 17 increase, but pretty much zero. And when we look at the projected budget, and we look at the heat map that we've brought before you as a board to show who's increasing, who's decreasing. The green on the left side is the really represents the higher need students, or the higher need districts, and the red, the lower need districts per the complexity index, the index in the formula today. And on the far right shows that percentage increase. And so what you see is IPS going down the first year, one of the few going down on this representative graph of many of the districts or across our state based on region, based on size, and then going up that second year for a total increase of 0.4%. But across the districts, you'll see a lot of increase of 2 to 3%, sometimes 4%, mainly because of the increase in foundation that has been given to every kid in every district, but yet no increase on the complexity base that's multiplied by a percentage of every district. And we look at, we read the news, we try to understand what is it that drives and what is the rationale for how these numbers come about. And so in 2019, they did a great story, IndyStar did a great story on some of the students, some of the leaders of IPS, and visited the classroom, visited the school buildings, and came away with a statement there that I have, that if the state continues to shift money away from poor urban districts and toward a funding model where schools across the state are funded equally, regardless of need, then like the students they're designed to serve, those programs themselves could be at risk. And so 2 years later, we're in a legislative session, and if you read the news, it's pretty well laid out, the methodology and the rationale of what we saw in that heat map on the previous slide. So the House Speaker says school funding is a balancing act. He defended the House's budget proposal to focus on increasing the funding baseline and emphasize that high poverty schools have benefited from 2 rounds of federal relief. So I'll stop right there. So the amount of dollars that Andrew's sharing that we're going to spend as a one-time is being taken into account for our sustaining work that we do now and in the future, and is impacting the rationale, the methodology of allocation. There's always pressure to fund complexity at greater and higher amounts. Putting more dollars towards students and foundation benefits all schools. Well, if you look back at the slide, it didn't benefit us the first year. We went down. So I can't see how that is true, even if they tried to benefit all schools. So again, as Superintendent Johnson recommended, as I look into the data of school by school, the complexity indexes for our schools, what's arriving at IPS's poverty index, our complexity index, I see a couple things, and I want to share some of the recommendations that we've highlighted when we talk with legislators. First is including an ELL weight of some kind in the school funding formula. If you look at our student-based allocation model, we have that in our model. And there's 4 or 5 years of doing the model and coming up with rationale and seeing where need is and trying to go towards equity. And within our schools, we've put that in and we've shared. You want to know an idea? Here it is. We see it happening in our schools, and we see it in the state data as well. As well, including a homeless weight. There's significant mobility in our districts, urban typically, but even COVID, even more so, is highlighting the homelessness situation that many of our families and many of our students are experiencing. And then flat out, fund the complexity base. The complexity base itself is 20% less than what it was in 13-14. And you're putting money in the foundation for all students, but you're not even funding the base. So our recommendation is fund the complexity base at a rate greater than or equal to the foundation base. And we've tied our weights in our student-based allocation to the foundation amount. So we have an example within our student-based allocation where we've done that. We're encouraging the legislators to do the same. So that was the state funding. Again, 50% of our budget, pretty large amount of our budget. The key takeaway there is that we're going to get less than people around us, and that puts us at odds when we're going out to compete for talent, when we're trying to sustain the work of attracting and retaining the best people to teach our kids. But when we look at the federal, Andrew and the team has done a great job of outlining the ESSER amount. This is a slide that I've just basically updated, giving the updates on where we are in some of these previous allocations. So right now with the initial CARES Act money, our team is working on a reimbursement request with IDOE for the amounts that we've outlined in the $26 million spend. With the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, this is an amount that the Marion County E-Learning Fund came about $2 million IPS was allocated, and we've submitted our first reimbursement request of that amount. And then, as Andrew outlined, the $98.4 million that's currently allocated to us through ESSER 2, the breakdown of the IPS amount versus the charter school amount. And then, as you see, we're assessing those needs and the allocation of how we're going to spend those dollars. And we've also highlighted this slide many times, the waterfall slide, our cash balance across our education, operations, and operating referendum funds. The purple line is what we're shooting for, sustainability. These green and orange lines, inaction, status quo, that's what we're really trying to work through when we talk about decisions that we have to make or revenues that we need to seek out. But without intentional focus on financial sustainability and continued strategic decision-making, the infusion of this $100 million of federal stimulus funds will mask the district's underlying structural deficit, which needs to be addressed. So we can't lose sight of the work that we still have to do amidst the receipt and the addressing of these COVID response needs. So as Superintendent Johnson stated at the beginning of the presentation, IPS understands the importance of living within our means. We've been responsible stewards of the precious funds we've received and will continue to make sure every single dollar benefits student learning. But we're going to face hard decisions in the coming months. We ask state legislators to recognize the value of our children by supporting the tremendous efforts IPS students, teachers, and families are putting in every day. Time open for questions.
Superintendent Johnson and Weston, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to start with commissioners on the phone. Commissioner Pritchard and Slack, we'll start with Pritchard. Do you have any questions for Weston?
This is Commissioner Pritchard. I do not have any questions. Thank you, Weston.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioner Slack?
This is Commissioner Slack. I do not have any questions. Thank you, Weston, for your presentation.
Commissioner Arnold?
I just have a logistical question. I know we've received less for transportation over the years, and that's part of what we're looking at in making some cuts. And I know that we've had to use education dollars to supplement transportation services. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And then when we do that, where do those dollars the fact that we're transferring dollars out of education to transportation, does that then lower the per student amount that schools get for their school-based allocations? How does that impact that?
Yes.
So
Any dollar not spent at a school that we have as a fixed cost, operating cost to get the students there, that is a dollar that cannot be in the SBA pool and allocated to schools through the weighted student formula.
Thank you.
Weston, thanks again. I want to thank Superintendent Johnson for your remarks this evening. And I think this is, I'm thinking back many months ago when we had this summer, which was a turbulent summer for our community. But in particular, we saw many communities, regardless of race, ethnicity, standing affirmed and standing in alignment and sitting together and asking the question about what they could do next. Well, this right here is about what can be done next. We're looking at years and years and years of those dollars that our children, not our children, all children who have English language learning challenges, live in poverty, English non-native speakers, homeless students, we're seeing a decline in the resources that those young people need to be successful. And so I just, encourage families who have been looking for a way to use their voice, that this is that moment. What I'll also say is this is also a moment, I'm channeling my friend Commissioner Moore here a bit, is this is an opportunity for us all to come together, because this isn't just an IPS issue. This is not just a Fort Wayne or a Crystal House issue. This is a student of color issue, okay? And so I just want to lift that up, that it doesn't matter what your make, model, type is, because frankly, whether you're a direct run school with an IPS, an innovation school partner, or a charter school partner, this complexity reality is a reality and a challenge for each and every child that you serve. So again, I just want to thank Superintendent Johnson for her remarks, and Weston, thank you for the presentation, and encourage our communities to stand firm and stand together and demand more from those decision makers who influence the budget making process.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Hawkins. And we will continue to advocate as we've been doing, and making sure our families and our teachers and team know how they can also make sure their voices are heard. We shared a similar presentation with the Superintendent's Advisory Council, and they were all engaged and willing to share their voice and to advocate on behalf of our kids and families. And so I know we have many folks in our community who are willing to do that as well. The next item that we'll move to is item 6.04. which is a presentation on the work we are doing on our high school post-secondary pathways. And so I'd love to invite Jennifer O'Shea, who serves as our post-secondary readiness officer, to present at this time.
Good evening, Commissioners and Superintendent Johnson. For those of you that I haven't yet had the pleasure, Jennifer O'Shea, Post-Secondary Readiness Officer, and I'm excited to share with you some updates on the work that our team has been engaged in with our high school's post-secondary pathways. So I just want to start by grounding us in how this work really aligns to the district strategic priorities. So first, strategic priority 1 is increase access to rigorous curriculum and instruction. And this work, by really transforming our pathways to ensure that they're high quality, really provides a springboard for post-secondary success, as demonstrated through the attainment of credentials and really other higher education and marketplace currency. So by embedding things like dual credit, advanced coursework that really prepares students for the rigor of higher education, industry-recognized credentials and certifications, and opportunities for hands-on experience as a resume builder, really, in addition to increasing the rigor of the actual curriculum and all of our pathways, really directly aligns to that first strategic priority. And then strategic priority 2, promote racial equity. The work is really going to ensure that, number 1, all of our students have access to and are able to enroll in a high quality pathway in our district. And the second piece to that is that we see equitable representation of the district in each of our pathways. So the only determining factors of the pathways that students wind up in is interests, skills, and aptitudes. So to really dive into this work, we decided to take a step back and look at where we were as a district in terms of our high school pathways and programs. And we quickly learned that we had 42 pathways across our 4 district-managed high schools, and really wanted to determine whether they met high-quality criteria. And so worked with MGT Consulting to conduct a comprehensive review across all of those pathways, using both qualitative and quantitative data. So the data that they collected, they used to create a profile for each and every pathway, all 42 of those pathways, and I'm happy to share that at any time if you need some light reading before bedtime. It's about 110 pages, but it really breaks down the components, the high quality components of each of the pathways, and determines whether they meet that, whether they need work, et cetera. And so some of the things that fed that were the advanced CTE quality measures, as well as the Hobson's 6 college, career, and life readiness competencies. They did also conduct surveys with parents and students. They talked to teachers, administrators. So they really got a full snapshot of all the pathways and used that information to create those profiles. Some of the major themes before I go into what was determined about each and every pathway is that, most of the pathways of the 42 pathways, most of them did require post-secondary education and or some type of credential, such as an industry recognized certification for career placement. but many of them did not really include those stepping stone credentials. They didn't have the embedded dual credit, the AP, or the certifications that were required to be high quality for students. The selection of pathways by students and parents we found varied very widely, from yes, I chose this to all the way to I don't know how I got into this pathway or program, and I really don't know what it is. So there were a number of different responses to that. So we've got some work to do in that area. In general, work-based learning and career technical student organizations are not available to students in most pathways, and those are critical components to ensuring that a pathway is high quality and really prepares students for post-secondary. Exit exams and culminating experiences and credentials didn't exist, again, in many of the pathways, and where they did, pass rates were low. Hiring teachers for many of these pathways does prove to be difficult. Many of them we bring in from industry as workplace specialists. And of course, recruiting is difficult. And then bringing folks in who don't have the foundational training of an educator can be a struggle. And so we really learned that we have quite a bit of work to do in that area as well. And then data outcomes for most pathways in terms of, what is the longitudinal data and what are the longitudinal outcomes are not collected. And so, again, that is something that we are focused on. And you actually may have seen, a contract that is going to allow us to do that through the Management Performance Hub. So the following recommendations, we're really going to dig into the pathways and what came out of this work. So after looking at those profiles, MGT came up with recommendations for the pathways really in 4 different areas. So the first was, sunset these pathways, right? They are low quality. There were a number of factors that led them to recommend sunsetting, merging some pathways where there is overlap or duplication, or it's, transforming the pathway. So good pathways, but really need some work, and here's where they need work to move to that high quality status. And then we learned that there were 5 pathways that are really, really good, and we just have to do continuous quality improvement. So with that, out of the 42 pathways, we landed on 23 CTE pathways. And these pathways will prepare students for both good entry-level jobs and for higher education. So students have choices and they have multiple on and off ramps, really trying to move away from that stigma that CTE is career only, that students earn a certification and they go on and they do this one job. We're really trying to prepare our students for both so that they have options. They can choose to take that entry-level certification, work for a short period of time, and then pursue higher education, or go straight into higher education with an industry focus, with some dual credits under their belt so they are on an accelerated path. So for our 23 CTE pathways, and you'll note at the top that it says post-secondary pathways, and you'll see that even as I talk about the more college prep programs, we're really trying to move to a place where we refer to them all as post-secondary pathways, because that's what they are. It's no longer college or career. We're really creating pathways that provide opportunities for both for students. So the first is really just building off the work that's been done at both Crispus Attucks High School and Arsenal Tech. There was a nursing pathway, and really what it did was provide a CNA. And while CNA is a great sort of entry-level certification, what we realized is that we need students to really build upon that. There's an opportunity in high school to earn beyond just the CNA. And so have been working on 2 different paths in the health sciences field, one being medical assistant and the other being healthcare specialist, which prepares them for patient care tech positions. And they will not only earn the CNA, but they'll earn other stackable credentials and certifications all the way up to that MA or PCA, in addition to earning, we were saying 29 dual credits, but we've learned that Ivy Tech will now provide 40 dual credits toward the healthcare specialist associate degree. So this is the remaining pathways. These are the pathways that really that will remain in place, and that we will work to transition to high quality and to the next level programs of study, which is where the state is going with CTE. So ensuring that every single CTE pathway has a foundational course and then has advanced courses that really build the technical skills and the academic skills of the students. and in a very specific sequence, and then culminate with a capstone course, which is work-based learning, project-based learning, but some type of immersive opportunity that really helps them build on those skill sets that they've learned in the classroom. So you'll see here, and we're still in Arsenal Tech High School, those in gray, those are where we're going to see major changes. So dental careers is going to be sunset. There were several reasons for this, but this really included, first and foremost, enrollment was very, very low. And, second, really, there was no credential or certification associated with this pathway. And because of its very nature, it wasn't preparing students for careers in the dental field. I think we all know that careers in the dental field typically require, at minimum, a four-year degree. Most of them require advanced degrees. And this program was really not preparing students for higher education in this space. We thought that students could be better served by participating in the Health Science Academy or in biomedical sciences or in the Math Sciences Academy. And so students will be redirected. Fire and rescue, we are not going to sunset that, but we are pausing for this year and working with our partners with the Indianapolis Fire Department to really build that out. What we learned was that students cannot become firefighters until they're 21. And so after completing this program, there was really nowhere for them to go for several years. And we found that many students were not actually going on to work in this field. And so we're regrouping on what are the certifications and ways that we can prepare them for higher ed in this area. And so really spending the next year working with that instructor and with IFD to determine, could we embed something like an EMS certification and dual credits. In terms of interactive media, MEP, those are both duplicative programs. They have overlap with another program, and so we're essentially merging those. Interactive media will merge with graphic imaging. MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, will be merged with construction trades. This is really a way to strengthen those pathways instead of having them be separate. By combining them, students are going to get even more certifications and credentials and will, really get a better and more robust experience. Pharmacy, we are sunsetting for very similar reasons to dental careers. Again, students were not earning certifications. There was not a lot of demand. It was not a strong pathway, and we think that students would be better served, again, in biomedical sciences, in the health sciences areas, or in something like Math and Science Academy. Project Lead the Way Engineering, we are merging all engineering programs into one at George Washington. We're doing this for a couple of reasons, primarily because it's the enrollment numbers weren't there, and it's a very expensive program to run, and we feel like by combining it at one school and really directing students that are interested in engineering to one school, we can really build out that pathway to be a very powerful one. So at Crispus Attucks High School, you're going to see it's very colorful here. So we are sunsetting health informatics and physical therapy. Again, very similar reasons, reasons similar to pharmacy and dental careers. So health informatics just is not even a state-approved pathway. The curriculum is very, very dated. And in talking with our partners in the health sciences area, we learned that students would be better served by potentially going into informatics at GW or, again, biomedical sciences. Health informatics is such a specialized and narrow field that students really need, they need a better and more robust sort of foundational skill set. So that is being sunset, as well as physical therapy, again, for very similar reasons. Students need a four-year degree, a master's degree. There aren't certifications embedded, and they are just better served in some of those other programs. At George Washington High School, no major changes. That academy and those pathways are relatively new. We'll continue to focus on growing those pathways and making them the best they can possibly be. So again, ensuring that they align with the next level programs of study, that they have those foundational courses, they have those the sequence of courses in place that build up those technical skills, those embedded dual credits, industry recognized credentials, AP, where it makes sense. And again, that culminating experience, their senior year, where they're participating in a co-op, internship, apprenticeship, et cetera. For Shortridge, we did make the determination, again, that engineering would sunset, enrollment was low there, and we really, again, were committed to creating one very solid engineering pathway at George Washington. Resources were spread very thin, enrollment was spread very thin, and so by consolidating it, we can create a really solid program there. And then radio and TV at Shortridge was really duplicative of what we were doing at Tech. And again, enrollment numbers are low and costs were high. And so just made logical sense to sunset that at Shortridge. One I didn't mention, I'm sorry, I may have skipped over it for Shortridge. I'm sorry, I will get to that when I talk about the next set of programs. So there will now be 7 high-quality college prep programs. So again, I just want to reiterate that we're referring to all pathways as post-secondary pathways, no longer college or career. We are preparing students for both in all of our pathways, but for internal reasons, we refer to them this way. And these are really going to ensure that, students are prepared for the rigor of higher education. So they are participating in those advanced courses, AP, IB, honors, that we're embedding dual credits to put students on an accelerated path, looking at a number of partnerships with higher education that have, 2-year, 4-year agreements between, say, Ivy Tech and a public or private institution in Indiana, where they earn that 2-year degree when by the time they've graduated, and then they go on to one of our local institutions as a junior. I also want to mention, and I didn't say this when I was talking about our CTE programs and pathways, but we are intentionally designing these pathways so that they not only prepare students for post-secondary, but that they also really ensure that students are meeting the graduation pathways requirements. So I believe I shared with you all at your retreat the grad pathways requirements, and each and every one of these pathways will do that without us having to even think about it. The students won't even necessarily know that they're checking those boxes, and it makes the graduation pathways very relevant, and everything will be aligned to their pathway, as opposed to it feeling like, oh man, I got a checkbox too. I've got to run out and do this just to check that box. It's going to be much more meaningful. So with the college prep programs, the major one I want to point out at Shortridge is that the VPA program will now become a true visual and performing arts program. So previously, students would be in the IB career program in either dance or fine arts or theater. Now all students will be VPA students, and while they might sort of major, if you will, in a specific area, they're going to have a much more robust visual and performing arts curriculum, curriculum, so that they're prepared for many different opportunities in that industry. And then some of the other key areas just at Tech, where we really refer to them as college prep programs, law and public policy, New Tech, and Mass Sci. Again, we're looking at early college models, AP capstone courses, and just how we can really strengthen those particular programs so that students can see very clearly that they are on a track for a 4-year degree and have the confidence to know that they can complete college coursework, and that they have some college courses under their belt, so that they're moving through that higher education experience at an accelerated rate. So this is just a snapshot of what the future of our high-quality post-secondary pathways look like. Please keep in mind that this is ongoing work. This is not a one and done. It started with the high school reinvention several years ago, and it will continue. We will set up methods to ensure that our programs and pathways are yielding good outcomes for our students. And if they're not, we're going to revisit them. We're going to continue to work on this. So this is going to be an iterative process. Although every couple of years we will not propose sunsetting, a number of pathways, but we will continue to do continuous quality improvement. Also wanted to show just what our other high schools are offering. So our IPS innovation schools, we do have 6 additional high school options for students. So you can see here what, Crystal House at Manual, Heron and Riverside, KIPP, Purdue Polytech, and Thrival are offering our students. We did keep these in mind as we looked at our pathways. What we're really trying to become is a district that offers students a variety of very high quality opportunities. While there might be duplication every now and then, we want to make sure if it's duplicated, it's because there is interest and because there is opportunity for our students. I also wanted to mention the investments that we have received because I think that's really important. We could not do this without our philanthropic investments. And so you'll see here we've had, over the course of the last few years, seen about $8 million worth of awards in a number of areas. So this includes everything from, providing career awareness and development opportunities to, really investing in equipment and supplies for our high schools. And so we're being very intentional about how we leverage these dollars to do this work so we can really set our schools up for success. And some of the investments in the pathways, just wanted you to see kind of where we're thinking about the investments. First and foremost, just upskilling and credentialing our teachers so they're ready to teach those advanced courses. So they're ready to teach AP. They're, really skilled at teaching IB courses, that they are credentialed to teach dual credit courses because they have to be certified for that. We're going to be creating ongoing onboarding and ongoing PD for our CTE teachers. I mentioned earlier that many of them come to us from industry, so we want to really provide them as much support as possible so they can be successful in the classroom. Enhancing our current advanced coursework offerings and really building out those advanced coursework offerings. Providing tuition support for our students who are in dual enrollment opportunities on our local campuses, transitioning, all of our pathways to the next level programs of study as required by the state. The good news is we'll be a little bit ahead of the curve on that. And then just creating more, high quality work-based learning opportunities, being able to pay students to participate in those because we know sometimes they have to make a choice if they have a job and they don't have that extra time. Making sure we have really great project-based learning where it's relevant. And then ensuring access and support for our students across the pathways and career awareness activities, college access, taking kids on tours of colleges and universities, just being able to do those types of things for our students that really make a big difference when it comes time to applying to college, as they've been on a campus and they know, hey, I know what this looks like, I know what this feels like. So really using these dollars, every penny of them, on making sure our students are completing these pathways and are prepared for post-secondary. So this is just a slide I've been using in pretty much everything, every presentation I share. What is it? What are the student outcomes? What is the outcome of this work? And it's really just making sure that, that every pathway really has something of value in an aligned post-secondary opportunity, and that it really allows students greater access. And there's people who think, how can we expect these young people to make choices, and what if they change their mind? That's okay. Our goal is twofold. It's one, to prepare them for post-secondary, right? And even if it's in a path they decide not to continue down, they have something of currency and value in their back pocket. And two, we have helped them learn how to make informed and intentional decisions about their future. So if they do decide to pivot, they'll know how to do that. And then just next steps, really launching into this work. The goal is to fully implement these pathways in the 22-23 academic year. So a steering committee will be a district level team, including administrators from the schools, to make these big strategic decisions that will then inform the work of the school-based implementation teams, who will be sort of boots on the ground doing this work at the school level to ensure the right courses are in place, the right teachers are in place, the teachers are trained and prepared to teach these courses. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I look forward to providing you all with more updates over the course of the next year. With that, happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Jennifer. Commissioner Arnold.
Yes, I guess I thought all of the healthcare related classes were at addicts. Is there a reason there's some, because it looks like that duplicates the healthcare specialist and the medical assistant at both schools?
Yep.
Is there a reason it's not located in just one?
We had thought about doing that, but there is so much student interest, and frankly, there is so much opportunity for our students that it just makes sense to keep it in both places. We are bursting at the seams in both programs. And so what we didn't want to do was shut one down and say it's only at Attucks and then have students not have access to it.
And my second question is, I see on slide 15, it talks about JROTC and communications at Shortridge, but I don't see JROTC at any of the other schools. Are we going to, don't all schools have JROTC?
Yes, all schools have it as an extracurricular, but not all of them have created a pathway around it. They just, got really creative at Shortridge, and it's something that the IB curriculum allows for. So we are going to explore that option at our other 3 high schools, absolutely.
But we're not taking away their current program.
Oh my gosh, no. They'll
Okay.
still have it as as an activity, as a program, but
Just not tied into the
just won't be
pathways.
right. Those courses will still be considered elective courses as opposed to it being part of an academic pathway.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
Can I get clarification? I'm always following up on somebody else's question. I'm going to follow up on Diane. So is this program at Shortridge, is it a program to help them become officers within the military? Is that what this program is for?
Yeah, it's JROTC is very clear in that it is not a recruitment program. But the way we see it is it really is meaning to prepare students for public service in some way, shape, or form, and leadership. So I think they would not specifically say that it's a recruitment effort for, students who want to be officers. But I think that is something that those kids will be encouraged to explore. Absolutely.
One more. No, go.
Commissioner Allen.
Yes, thank you. I want to go back to slides 7 and 8, particularly under cosmetology and culinary arts. There is an entrepreneurial focus. Can you elaborate on what that looks like?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Slides 7 and 8, under cosmetology and culinary arts. Some of the key changes is add an entrepreneurial focus. Can you elaborate on what that looks like?
Yeah, the idea with those is to really strengthen those pathways by offering or embedding the entrepreneurship capstone into those so that students not only come out with credentials and certifications in cosmetology or culinary arts, but that they also are prepared to essentially run their own businesses and or go on to higher education to really focus on business and entrepreneurship. So it's really just trying to strengthen those 2 programs so that students have additional paths.
Commissioner Moore, I think you had a second question.
I think I answered my question, though. So I was fortunate enough to be able to participate when they would first start talking about doing these pathways, and I was in the business finance piece. And as an accountant, as a CPA, which is only like less than 5% of us who look like me, can you tell me what you did with your accounting pathway? Because I'm looking for it, because it looked like it said somebody was going to move it to entrepreneurship, but I don't see it over here.
Yeah, it's still going to be within the business and finance. So if you look at the very second one under George Washington on slide 10, banking and finance is accounting. It's just under the new next level programs of study. They're now calling the accounting pathway banking and finance.
They call the accounting program banking and finance.
They'll now be referring to it as the banking and finance pathway, but it'll still essentially be accounting. It'll be the same curriculum preparing students for opportunities in that field.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Collins.
I think the pathways are terrific, but I'm wondering, Jennifer, how is the student kind of groomed, if you will, to understand what the pathway means? And they choose in 8th grade, so how do the high schools address both retention of the student in the pathway as well as the flexibility to maybe take another option and to understand what that pathway means?
Yeah, that's a really good question and something that we've been really working hard on. I remember in my first month with the district, I said to Superintendent Johnson, okay, we've got these amazing opportunities. Now, how do we help young people understand how to make that informed and intentional choice? And so there have been a lot of efforts in that middle school space to really help students understand those pathways when they're using Naviance and taking self-assessments, tying those to the pathway options in our high schools. So really much more concerted efforts. We're looking at adding and exploring college and careers course in that middle school space. So there have been a lot of efforts. There's the 8th grade extravaganza. We started it last year, of course. This year it was not in person. We did it virtually, but that's an opportunity for students to meet with the high schools, learn more about the pathways. So we really have to start talking about it sooner and really helping them understand how their interests, skills, and aptitudes really align to the offerings in high school. In addition, when the students choose their high school, they essentially choose not necessarily their really specific pathway, but they would choose, say at George Washington, the business academy. And then in that 9th grade year, through planning for college and careers and a number of efforts around career development, students learn more about the pathways within that, but also their other options at the building. So again, once the 10th grade year starts and they're meant to start in that pathway, they are armed with plenty of information. And we do allow them to transfer high schools once. They can transfer more than that, but it has to be a conversation with their counselor to ensure that if they do make that transition to another building or another program, that they're going to be on track to graduation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And if a student, let's say in their freshman year, they choose banking and finance, and something happens to that particular pathway that it's sunset to something else, then they would be able to choose another place maybe?
Yeah, and we are trying to sunset them in a way that does not cut students off from completing their pathway. So for those we're sunsetting, it's going to be a transition. We're going to allow students to take that second level course next year and complete the pathway, and then we will completely, sunset the program. So we will never put the students in a position where we're going to get rid of a pathway or program and they're going to be, out there with, not in a position to be on track to graduate or to complete a pathway. So we will always be mindful of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. For Commissioner Pritchard and Slack, I want to give you both an opportunity to ask Jennifer questions.
Commissioner Slack, thank you, Jennifer, for being here tonight, and thank you for your wealth of knowledge that you've imparted to us. It's a lot of information to take in, but I do want to ask, I want to make a comment first on slide 12. I am so happy to see that we're increasing the quality of our college prep courses, because lots of our parents a lot of money by giving those programs and being able to get those dual credits. So I want to commend us on doing that work. I do have some questions when we're talking about pharmacy, and now I'm trying to figure out what slide that was on again now. It was pharmacy, and it was in, I think it was in Arsenal Tech.
Yep.
Yeah, I see it on slide 8.
Yep.
And in this gray section, are we saying that these are the areas that are going to be sunsetting and we're not going to do anything to correct them, correct?
So some of them will be merged, but pharmacy is one that will be sunset, yes.
Okay, so I was wondering, why would we merge the pharmacy with the medical program? And why are we not offering that pharmacy in cohesive to the medical assistance at Christmas Attic?
So what we're doing
is related to medical.
Yeah, so for students who are interested in pharmacy, and I will say enrollment in that is really, really low, and there are no certifications that can be offered to high school students in pharmacy. So what we're doing is for students who have an interest in that area, we're recommending that they pursue one of the pathways in the Health Sciences Academy that will give them better foundational skills, because if they're interested in pharmacy, they're going to need an advanced degree. And so it would make more sense to put them in a program that really, gets them prepared for higher education. So whether it be biomedical sciences or, healthcare specialist. So we're not really merging them, but those students will be redirected. If you have the interest, skills, and aptitude for health sciences and specifically in pharmacy, let's get you prepared for a 4-year and advanced degree through some of our other programs that have advanced coursework, that have, AP courses, and that are really sending students on to 4-year institutions. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. And then I also had another area with Arsenal Tech when we talked about law. We're not done with correcting our key changes with that law and policy, right? Because I see here that we're talking about that it gave people the emphasis that we were doing pre-law school there. Mm-hmm. So now we're trying to correct that. And we're still trying to word that right, correct? Because I finally don't understand your key changes, like can you give me clarification, I guess, on the key changes that you're trying to do there?
Yeah, so we are really trying to strengthen that program. And again, some of this is still yet to be determined. But what we really want to do is strengthen that law and public policy program so that students are earning that honors diploma, that we're embedding AP coursework. We're talking about an AP capstone. Again, we know to really participate in this field, you need a degree. And so what are the ways in which we can really prepare students for higher ed programs in law and public policy? And so really looking at how do we make that more of a college prep program versus, what it currently is, which is just a couple of courses. Does that help?
Are we looking for partnerships for that program?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you.
Are we looking for partnerships for that program? Because I see there it says partnerships for the academy should start within internal opportunities. Yep. But we don't say that we have parent partners there.
We don't have really solid partnerships, and so we want to develop them. So we have a great relationship with IFD for our fire and rescue. What we'd like to do is work more closely with law firms, the city of Indianapolis, the state, just to really help students connect with those organizations that do this work so they can really understand what a career in law and or public policy could look like.
When we go back to slide 11, when we're talking about Short Ridge High School, and we're talking about the radio TV.
Yep.
So we're removing programs, saying that we have a duplicate in tech, but did we have low enrollment for that program? Since that's an art school, I'm kind of trying to see where we're steering there. Why did we have low, if we did have low enrollment?
Yeah, the radio TV program at Short Ridge really struggled to get off the ground. They haven't had the proper equipment. They haven't had a lot of interest. They have been mentioning this for the last few years that they were kind of struggling with this program. And so we thought it made sense just to put all resources into the program at Tech and really direct students there. So while it might sound like it makes some sense at Short Ridge, it's just, the lack of interest and the lack of just a really solid curriculum and equipment just made it difficult for them to really run effectively.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to commend us on slide 18 too, because I really like the investments and where we're making these investments. That when we're talking about helping our teachers and upskilling our teachers, I feel like we got a lot of work to do, but we're getting there. So thank you for your presentation tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Pritchard, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I just have one question. Is this the first time that IPS has done a survey like they did with MGT?
The district has worked with MGT in other capacities, but this is the first time that I believe we have used them in this particular capacity.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear what you. This is the first time they've done a survey of the high schools?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. You took my question. I was trying to understand if MGT had been involved in some of the initial creation of the pathways at any point in time.
Don't believe so.
Okay. The other question is, so I want to make sure I understand, there are 42 pathways between the 4 direct run high schools, right? And 30, how many of those are CTE, and then how many of those are college? I want to make sure I understand the
So
mix.
there's 23 CTE pathways and 7 college prep pathways.
Okay,
So we're
all
down
right.
to about 30. But keep in mind, this is still a work in progress. So we, may end up having to, separate out 1 or 2 of the CTE pathways depending on the direction the state goes. But generally speaking, that's what we're at.
Okay, I'm still trying to rack my brain here and understand the architecture and how the tentacles move when you pick a lane, I guess, right?
Yep.
And so I guess, off the top of your head, maybe I'm just curious sort of what are the, I'm looking at slide 15 and slide 16 and 15, there's a lot going on there, particularly at tech. And, just acknowledging that there's a lot going on. And so when you think about like, what are the most high demand programs that students are attracted to, that families are attracted to? Maybe just if you could kind of identify here on this slide what those are.
Yeah. So first, I do want to mention this looks like a lot, and so we are trying to really organize our pathways under academy or institute type umbrellas, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So I just wanted to mention that there are several programs, and I believe Superintendent Johnson that you recently received an email from our CTE Pathways Director with the highest enrollments, and so I'm blanking on those at the moment. But I can tell you that cosmetology, automotive services are 2 really big ones at Tech, our sort of traditional CTC programs. We also have a lot of interest, of course, in our health sciences programs. So medical assistant, healthcare specialist, well, they're new. I'm sort of lumping them in with the CNA, but those programs at both Tech and Addix are hugely popular. We also have had quite a bit of interest in welding, so much so that we're expanding welding, looking at doing some construction and adding more equipment because there are so many students that are interested. So I would say those are probably the biggest ones that come to mind. And then, of course, you have the IB diploma program at Shortridge, which makes up, 50% of their student population. And then everything is a little bit more evenly spread out.
No, I appreciate you.
I was just going to share, I just pulled up the data she sent me. So health sciences, welding, computer science were our 3 highest funded courses if you're looking at through the lens of what's sort of funded by the state. Those are our 3 highest.
Thank you for that. So I think the other maybe question is just sort of thinking through, on the other side of this, whether it's 30 or 42, whatever that is or will become, as we think about when students leave and truly enter the post-secondary world, how do we, as we're thinking about retooling the program, I'm assuming it's demand and interest, it's, how well are we doing it? And then also maybe that's part of how what we're doing is the outcomes. And as students move on to post-secondary, are they tapping into those career paths? Are they going to 2 or 4 year institutions? Are they enlisting? How does that output sort of play into how you're thinking about this shift?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that's been on our mind is how do we look at outcomes by pathway to really determine, what we do with the pathways, right? And so we are currently working with, as I mentioned earlier, KSM Consulting to analyze some data that we are going to be requesting from the state about outcomes. We're going to be looking back. We won't have it by pathway because that's not how data was tracked or how we've tracked it in our student information system, but we're going to set ourselves up to look at that moving forward. And so moving forward, we want to look at 2 things. We want to look at are students progressing? Are they progressing along these pathways, right? Are they completing the coursework on time? Are they successfully completing the college coursework and earning those credits? Are they earning those certifications, et cetera? So, we're going to be looking at those sort of completion and progression rates. We're also going to be looking at longitudinal data. What happens to those students 1 year out, 5 years out? What industries are they employed in? What do their wages look like? Are they earning 2 and 4 year degrees? We're going to be looking at a number of those things. Enlistment's a little more difficult. We are not able to get that data, but we're going to be using those 2 key things, student progress and completion of the pathways, and then long-term student outcomes to really continue to look at our pathways and determine, how do we continue to pivot and provide the best pathway opportunities for students where we know they have the most success.
Great, thank you.
The one thing I'll note, and Jennifer, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it, but at the State House right now, there's also some proposed legislation that would eliminate some of the state funding for some of the CTE courses. And so, depending on the outcome of that, could, force us to sort of have to reevaluate some of this and determine, do we fund from our own district budget? Do we not offer that programming anymore? So just want to name that that's something that Jennifer and her team are tracking really closely at the State House during this time as well.
Commissioner Arnold.
I find that very interesting, since the big push is students being able to get a job right after they get out of high school, become productive citizens, and they're reducing funding. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. We can move into unfinished business, and there are no items in unfinished business. There are 2 items this evening in new business. The first item, I believe it's item 8.01. Yes, is the administration's request for the approval of a renewal, an extension of the MOU that we have with the John Marshall Collaborative. I believe we have Mike Higbee here, as well as, I need to cheat and look at my names, Mike Higbee along with Charlie Garcia, who are both here from the collaborative and have been playing key roles in moving that work forward. Scott Martin presented the full presentation to the board on Tuesday, and so I would invite Mike and Charlie just to share any highlights from your point of view of what's going well and what the future holds ahead. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson and Commissioners. Good to see you. Mike Higbee, and I'm part of the John Marshall Collaborative with my partner, Charlie Garcia. And I think we're probably here to see if you have any questions. We can give you a little bit of an overview of what we've been up to since, thank you, Scott, my assistant here. What we've been up to since we executed the MOU with you last June of 2020. Our primary activity has really been engaging with the neighborhood. As you know, this is an asset in the community, the Far East Side, that is very important to the neighborhood. They have been struggling with trying to figure out what the right track might be. Charlie and I showed up one day with an agreement with IPS to kind of take a look at the property to see if we could work with the neighborhood to program. And I have to tell you, there was some skepticism about what our intentions were. So we first and foremost had to sit down and come to an understanding that we understood from the get-go, and I think IPS certainly understood this as well, that we're not doing anything with that facility unless the neighborhood sees it as a benefit to the neighborhood and they're part of it. And so we had to get to the point of everybody agreeing that that was a given, that we were going to partner with the neighborhood, that they were critical to the solution, and that together we had to really roll up our sleeves and get to work, because this is not an easy project to figure out. Our assumption, as Charlie and I got into it, was that there was an excellent opportunity to, first and foremost, connect that facility to some tremendous job growth that is happening over in Hancock County, just 3 miles to 4 miles directly due east of the site. You take 38th Street out to Hancock County, you're on 300 North. You take 300 North about another mile, and you're at the front door of the new Amazon Fulfillment Center. They're hiring about 3,000 to 4,000 people at that center. And then just up the road from that center, Walmart is under construction with a new facility just north of the airport out there. And they will hire about another 3,000 workers once they're open in about 1.5 years. The work within these facilities is going to be very diverse. These are highly automated facilities, and they're going to need people trained in not only doing the basic logistics of the center, but running this machinery, programming the machinery, and making sure it is up and running and doing what it needs to do every day. So we're hoping to work with those employers, work with the Hancock County Economic Development Corporation. Right now, there are 21 projects that are either under construction or about ready to start construction that will be employing a lot of people. Before the pandemic, in this neighborhood, the Far East Side, If you looked at the 16 to 24-year-old age group, when we were at full employment in this country, that group within that neighborhood had a 28% unemployment rate. So the connection to jobs and opportunity has not been very good. And our first and foremost, we wanted to work with the neighborhood to see if indeed that should be the priority, the catalyst for starting something we're conceptualizing or calling an opportunity hub. And that facility, we think, can really be programmed not only to be a training and job placement center, but open up a number of other opportunities, support services, certainly entrepreneurial activity, the career pathways that were just discussed, we think are critical, and something that can be programmed into that facility. With the primary premise is that if you're in that neighborhood right now, you have to get on a bus or get in a car and travel quite a distance to go find the opportunity, and quite often in an unwelcoming environment. And if we can bring those services and those opportunities to the neighborhood and access them right there in the neighborhood, then we have an opportunity to really make a difference in people's lives. The market shed, and I'll stop at this point and see if Charlie wants to fill in the gaps here, but the market shed that we hope to serve is about a 3-mile radius around that site, and as you could see in the packet that we provided, that's about 85,000 people within 3 miles of that site. The other universe of customer base that we feel is important to look at to see if we can have some impact on them as well is the number of businesses that are within a 10-minute drive of that site. Almost 600 businesses with 20 or more employees. And we think there could be a business accelerator program to really help some of the businesses that have started there that may be struggling right now, help them really kind of get the roots dug in a little bit deeper and find a growth opportunity as they go forward. So we hope to serve not only the residents, but the businesses within the neighborhood. Charlie, do you want to step in?
Sure. The model that we're using is one that some of you are familiar with. Of course, Commissioner Arnold, when we did the Central State Hospital, we needed a point of leverage. Also, Commissioner Hawkins, when we did the Meadows, we needed a point of leverage. Of course, in Central State, it was Hawthorne, and we thank you for that support. Commissioner Arnold took years to get off the ground, but it's vibrant now and growing. And Commissioner Hawkins, you were very involved in the Meadows, as well as Commissioner Pritchard. A heavy lift with Tinley and Avondale Meadows, which is now the Indianapolis schools. But this school is a leveraging point for us, for that community. It's a community that has a lot of needs, continues to erode and digress. I was one of the founders of La Plaza, which came in a cafe. So I've been very involved in the neighborhood for a couple decades now. So taking those models and utilizing those as examples of what can be done, heavy lifting, a lot of resources, but we know that John Marshall is that point of leverage for us as we can continue to meet with the community. So this MOU is very important to us. It is what has really differentiated us from other initiatives that had attempted to be launched in that community. But with this property, we really believe over the next year or two that we can really get some momentum. We already have momentum going. We have supporters. The Glick Foundation is supporting us. All the community, most of the community has stepped up and is supporting us. So we appreciate your consideration of what we're doing out there. But again, it's heavy lifting, as some of you know, but we have great examples of success and what it can transpire to be. So, questions?
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation, and thank you again for being here Thursday night and Tuesday night as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to begin with Commissioners Pritchard and Slack, who are on the phone, if either of the two of them have questions.
Commissioner Slack.
Pritchard.
Go ahead, Commissioner Slack.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Commissioner Slack.
No, go ahead. I'm fine. Go ahead.
I was just going to say thanks for the presentation. I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Slack.
Hello. Thanks for the presentation again. Thanks for coming out on Tuesday night and now tonight. I looked over the program and it looked really, really well. I like the partnership and the work we're doing with training. So I have no questions. Thank you guys for the work, though.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Arnold.
First of all, it's great to see you. We have a long history with one another. I'm glad to see that you're working with Cafe. I know they do a lot of work, and it's good to see you're connected. I know you mentioned the GLIC organization. I know they've been very active out there, and so can you just highlight a little bit about what their part or what their participation is?
Yeah, actually, my involvement started with Mary Ann Glick, and she asked me to come out and look at the school for a number of reasons, primarily because well, if you don't know, I'm in construction development, primarily construction engineering. So when I evaluated the building, I gave her some opinions on the building itself. And that led to more discussions of how much money they've invested already in the community. They have close to 1,200 units out there, the GLIC properties. So they are vested in the community, but have not been able to find an initiative that could really develop and transition that community. So when she approached me, of course, Commissioner Arnold, I called Mike and I said, okay, I got another difficult one for you. And so they're very supportive. As any investor, they want to see more substance, if you will, which we are preparing now. They are willing at least to consider investing, but it just wouldn't be the GLIC Foundation, it would be others. We have spoken with a number of philanthropic agencies. They're all very interested in what we're doing out there, and primarily in the training and certification area, and also from the standpoint of transitional housing for that area. So, and working with the community is very important. So to answer your question, I don't mean long-winded, but they're very vested from a financial and from a philanthropic position for that area. So we have continued discussion with them.
Well, I wish you all the luck. I know that there's a very dense population. I mean, there's a lot of apartments, a lot of young people. I can remember several years ago. I know that school is a facility that we've struggled with figuring out something productive to do. So I can only speak for myself, but it sounds like a great opportunity, and wish you good luck moving forward. I'd love to come out and see it sometime.
I think Kenneth was before.
Commissioner Allen.
Yes, again, thank you for being here today as well. How have you all maintained engagement with that community and the pulse of that community in the COVID?
Really good question. And again, I had to start a bit slowly because I think there was some skepticism about why we would be interested in coming out and trying to do something with John Marshall. And both, as Diane knows, and Commissioner Evans and Commissioner Pritchard, Commissioner Arnold, who we've worked together with before, at our heart, we're community builders. And we know there's a need and we know there's an opportunity. We kind of felt the timing was right to engage with IPS and then the neighborhood to see if we could get something on track. So I will tell you, it took a good 6 months to get the engagement moving in the direction that we felt was necessary to have the partnership strong enough to really move forward. Councilor Jackson, the councilwoman from the district, she runs Pathways. She's been very instrumental in helping us. There's a redevelopment committee with about a dozen community leaders on it. They've been great to work with, and they've really given us a lot of guidance. So we first sat down with them. They kind of got to know us a little bit, and then they started kind of giving us some insights about what we should be considering and what we should be looking at, and where they were going to really kind of do their own due diligence on us and our program to make sure it was going to fit for the neighborhood. And so they've been kind of our guiding light. Cafe, as Commissioner Arnold mentioned, has been very, very involved. They do a lot of support services. They engage on the community level. So they've given us a lot of insights as well. That's one level of community participation. To Charlie's point, there's a broader partnership group that we have to start building because we can't do this by ourselves. We've always been clear there are many partners within the broader community, Ivy Tech kind of being one of the key ones that really need to be at the table to help us program and support what we hope to put into that building. As you know, that has about 340,000 square feet. About 200,000 square feet is conventional space, office or classroom. And we are assuming of that 200,000 square feet that we're at something close to full occupancy if we program 160,000 square feet. So we're looking at that 160 and dividing it into 3 chunks. Kind of training and education, support services, and then entrepreneurial and enterprise activity. We think that entrepreneurial and enterprise activity will kind of sustain the overall program. We are working with a 2-year to 5-year program right now that we want to figure out what the first 2 years look like as far as the financial model, and then what those last 3 years look like of the 5 years that will get us to sustainability and a community asset that the community can then run and maintain. Charlie and I, we've made it very clear to the neighborhood, we didn't wake up one day and say, we want to own John Marshall. So this is going to be a community asset at the end of the day. It's going to be an asset that they control and that they maintain, but we got to get it to that sustainable level first.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
Sure, I remember you guys came here early on, and of course you're in my district. So, and I said then, and as I'll say now, that I'm very happy that you found the will to try to do something for that community, because the Far East Side has truly suffered over the past couple of years as we have continued to put money into central part of Indianapolis. So I guess my number one question is so Cafe and Liz had this project called the Far East Side Economic Inclusion Project. Were you guys involved in that? And if so, I mean, how did you bring it forth with the projects that you're working on now? And do you participate in those conversations and discussions?
We have talked to those partners, and they are engaged at the community, and we've been invited into some of those conversations, but we haven't fully engaged yet, to be totally honest. And I think we've been waiting to, and I think they've been waiting to see how they can interface with us and we can interface with them to take advantage of the work that they've done to date. It's my understanding they still are very much in the early stages as well as far as figuring out what the programming is going to look like and how to put that on the ground in the neighborhood. So we're aware of it. We've had some conversations, but we really haven't done much with it yet, I have to admit.
Okay, I would strongly suggest that you guys consider that, because as we look at some of the things that you're talking about doing within that building, that is definitely an economic issue for that community, and bringing, some solidarity to the community and some of the things that they're trying to do. So,
I think the best person is for us doing it. We've talked to Lisk, but is there somebody that we should see as a point on that we should be engaging with?
So can I get the information to you?
Sure.
I will do that.
All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner Moore. And again, gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. It's great to see you both, and thank you for taking this project on. So, I think at this point, board, it's time for us to entertain a motion to extend the MOU. So I'm going to formalize that. Do I have a motion to agree to extend the term of the Memorandum of Understanding through June 30th as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion? All right, Mr. Brunler, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold.
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard.
Commissioner Pritchard, yes.
Commissioner Slack.
Yes.
Secretary Collins.
Yes.
Vice President Moore. Yes. President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Brunler. Oh, please.
We'd really be negligent if we didn't thank IPS for all the support and being willing to give us this opportunity to do this. You took a risk with us. Hopefully we've lived up to it to date. We know we still, as Charlie said, have a heavy lift here, but none of it would have been possible if you didn't agree to work with us and the neighborhood to get this far. So thank you very much.
Thank you both for being here. Thank you from our team for Scott Martin and his support of the work. And we're just very excited about what is possible. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Our final item tonight is item 8.02, which is approval of the school year calendar for school year 21-22. I'm going to briefly walk through just some of the context by which we created the calendar before we ask for the board's approval. Great. So we can go ahead to slide 3. So as we think about the calendar, there were a few things that we kept in mind. One, thinking about how we, as you've heard about, plan to leverage the ESSER II dollars to support learning. 2, the urgent academic needs we have, given the disruption of this year with COVID and accelerating learning so we can meet the goals that we've set forth in our 2025 strategic plan. And then thirdly, the time that students have lost both at the end of the last academic year as well as this year, and how we think about that in our calendar. So you've heard about a number of these things already this evening. As you're well aware, we are looking to create short-term learning acceleration opportunities. Those things right now would be outside of the school year calendar, and so on, Saturdays, weekends, summer acceleration, et cetera, for this upcoming year, that will be invested in our tier 1. So that's the first point of instruction that our teachers give in the classroom, that we are focused on protecting time and carving out sacred time for teacher development and support as they are internalizing that high quality curriculum. And then again, that those changes made in our calendar support our overall academic strategy and the focus we want to have in the year ahead. So our goals for the calendar were to increase our teacher professional development time. So again, as they're going into classrooms with curriculum, ensuring that they have the supports needed and the time needed to really internalize that curriculum. To preserve student learning time. Oftentimes in calendars and school schedules, you'll see students aren't in class so that teachers can get that professional learning time. We wanted to be sure we did not shorten student learning days in order to get the teacher professional development. And then we also wanted to provide a summer break. We know this year has been an incredibly challenging year for our school-based staff. And so to the extent possible, we will still offer summer programming this summer for students, but to the extent possible, want to be sure that our staff members can take some well-deserved, well-earned time to rest, to recover, and renew for next year, and give our principals and 12-month staff time for adequate planning for the next school year. We engaged several groups in creating the calendar, to district discussions with IEA team and teacher representatives. We took it to a focus group of principals and teacher leaders as we were considering how we might leverage our calendar differently. And then I took it to the superintendent's parent and community advisory council to get their feedback late last week. So you can see here just sort of the nuts and bolts of the calendar. What I will highlight is different, is that we go from the 2-week breaks at fall and spring to 1-week fall break and 1-week spring break. That's helping us get those additional days for teacher professional development. There will be 5 days at the beginning of the year for teacher professional development and training, as well as for teacher work time built in within that 5 days. And then throughout the year, building in, again, those days for teacher professional learning time. We will still have the full 180 days of student learning. So why are we sort of putting the focus where we are? We believe if we increase the number of professional development days at the beginning of the year, then school teams will have the time to really focus in on building a strong back to school culture and climate as they start the year, particularly given, again, the disruptions we faced this year. We believe the focus on the beginning of the year for increased professional learning would allow our teams to really more deeply internalize the curriculum and also give us the opportunity to partner with some organizations in the field who are very well regarded for their professional learning that they can provide. And then throughout the year, we want to have the opportunities for teachers to do those step backs and say, what's working, what's not working, how might I need to adjust my practice? And so by having those days embedded within the course of the school year, we're able to do that. So for this year, we'll be focused really on strengthening our teacher professional development. So for the time that we do have our students during the school day, how do we make sure we're maximizing instruction and that high quality instruction is happening? We'll do that by being focused on Tier 1 instruction, using high-quality curriculum and supporting teachers in effectively implementing that curriculum. And then as we think about the 22-23 school year, we'll sort of do some reflection on what worked well for this year, and if we think there are other adjustments to make to the calendar. You'll hear about a number of school districts considering things like extended day or extended year. We wanted to first sort of focus on that teacher practice and then consider perhaps those other adjustments moving forward. So you might see that come up in the years ahead. There's a copy of the calendar that was included in board docs, the actual calendar itself. And so the administration just requests the board's approval of that calendar.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Johnson? Commissioner Collins.
Superintendent Johnson, when I'm looking at the calendar itself, where are those, and you said there were 5 days added to professional development for teachers, but it looks like on the professional development days for the first semester there, it's 7. So is there only 2 more professional development days in the rest of that semester?
There's 5 before the year starts. So if you look at that last week of July, you'll see 4 sort of pink days and then 1 in red. The 4 are the professional development, and the red is the teacher work day. And then you'll see 1 day in September, October, and November that are also professional learning days.
Okay. And will teachers be on a contract for the number of days that they're actually working, including the professional development days, or are they on the?
So our goal will be, we'll go to the bargaining table with IEA in September, and so to take into account those additional days of time that they're spending as we're bargaining out next year's contract. So that's our intent.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Superintendent Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Slack, go ahead.
Hello, Superintendent Johnson. I do have a question when it regards to summer schooling. So are we thinking about doing part-time summer schooling, or are we going to do, I heard you say that we need our teachers to get a rest, and I definitely agree with you if they're on burnout. So are we doing full summer, or are we doing part summer? How is that going to look? Or we won't know until we do the bargaining unit?
No, and I'll let Dr. Morgan chime in here as well. So we're planning for a regular termed summer school that would start not long after the school year ends. We are partnering with TNTP, and so they have a number of teachers who will be working in partnership with us to provide instruction during summer school. I believe right now we are expecting we'll need a small number of IPS employed teachers who are willing to come and teach during summer school, but to the extent possible, trying to sort of manage that number on the lower end so that, again, teachers have the opportunity to take that time for rest and renewal. Warren, do you want to talk a little bit more about summer school planning?
Yeah, and we're still making some of the final adjustments and plans. So we will have a program that we're providing. There will be academic enrichment as well as intervention for students in ELA and math. We're planning to do most of our grade levels. We're also thinking about partnering with some other community partners to provide resources to families as well. And so when we provide a package to families, we'll be sharing our option of our summer school that we'll be doing, but then also sharing more information about some of those partners that we'll need. And as Superintendent Johnson mentioned, we're partnering with TNTP, and we'll also need some of our IPS teachers as well to support with this. We're planning also a summer bridge program for our rising 9th graders so that they can be acclimated to high school. Of course, at this point, we don't know the modality of which summer school will take place, whether it'll be, fully in person or virtual or hybrid. That's to be seen. But we're prioritizing, if we can be in person, that will be the top choice that we'll be looking at.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I mean, I know that is well needed, especially when we talk about in the context of slide 3 for this presentation. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Pritchard, I don't want to leave you hanging in there. Any questions for Superintendent Johnson?
Thank you. I do not have any questions, though, but thanks.
All right. All right. Well, I appreciate Commissioner Slack's question, just clarifying around summer school. And I know that there's a robust summer, programming, community partners and of the like that are assembling that plan. So I hope that as that starts to really unfold, that we're, supporting our families as they learn to navigate what the options and availabilities are, because certainly, acknowledge that this is a summer that requires some rest. I think everyone acknowledges that, but also, our young people are, we've looked at the data. We know that there has been a need for recovery and for resurgence. So, I know that we're not alone on this. There are partners that are standing by and ready to love on our kids and support our kids and educate our kids and support them through the summer season. So
Yes, and I should note Christian Strickland and her team have been engaged as that planning work has been getting underway. So yes, we want to make sure we're making those connections and providing those resources to our students and families.
Great, thank you. All right, so with that being said, I think we'll move to the adoption of the resolution. So do we have a motion to approve the school year 2021-22 calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further comments? All right, hearing none, Mr. Bernler, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold.
Yes.
Commissioner Pritchard.
Commissioner Pritchard, yes.
Commissioner Slack.
Yes.
Secretary Collins.
Yes.
Vice President Moore.
Yes.
President Hawkins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bernler. Okay, so we're going to move to section 9 of the agenda, closing comments. Does any commissioner wish to offer any closing comments this evening? Commissioner Moore.
Okay, my mother and them always said that I had a one-track mind. I always jump right straight to it versus doing all the nice stuff you're supposed to do before. And I want to say that most of the times I ask my questions direct, and I never say thank you for all the hard work that you have done to bring forth IPS on the track that we are now. So I want to take this opportunity to say I apologize that I always jump straight forward versus telling you guys how much I appreciate all the hard work the superintendent and her team have done to bring us where we are today. So I want to thank you and commend you for all the hard work.
Commissioners Pritchard or Slack, any closing comments?
I do not have any. Thank you for the administration, all the work they've done, though. I appreciate everything everyone's done to get everything together for us this next school year.
Yeah, thank you. I do not have any comments. I did appreciate the superintendent's comments before the budget presentation. Thanks for making those.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. So I'll just briefly say that, we're wrapping up Black History Month, and I just want to first acknowledge and just express my gratuity and how proud I am of our young people and our students. I saw on social media all kinds of lessons and programs or projects and things of that nature and discussions that were happening. So I just want to thank each of you and our educators for continuing to stay focused. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I love IPS is because we keep that light shining on justice and equity. And for many organizations and many folks in our community, that light will turn off in March, but it won't turn off at IPS. And so I just want to lift that up and acknowledge that. And especially, I think, in a time where, there's so much work to be done. And I was reminded, many of us were reminded this week that this is the 1-year anniversary of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And, I think that's just an affirmation, a reaffirmation that this is, this is a long, long, long road. And so I say all that to say not to bring us down, but to recognize that there's so much more work to do. And actually, and I also want to give a shout out related to this to a group of parents. I had an opportunity to spend some time with some parents yesterday, virtually, and a firm reminder of the excellence of what we can do as a people as we focus on justice and equity. And these parents were hyper focused on the issues and the topics that were discussed today during this board meeting around equitable allocation of resources to young people, particularly Black and brown students, around disciplinary practices, around academic achievement, the achievement gap, et cetera, you name it, they were on it. And so I want to lift them up as a shining example of Black and brown excellence, particularly in the Black History Month that we're in February. Thank you. So with that being said, Superintendent Johnson, we'll pass to you. closing
Thank
comments.
you. And thank you, commissioners, for your time, questions, and feedback tonight. We've now been back in school for about 6 weeks, and I've been thrilled to visit our school buildings and see our students and teachers. I was at George Washington this morning. It's been heartening as well to see our community positivity rates continue to come down. You may have heard Dr. Kane saying they're now considering what schools may have the ability to do in terms of bringing all grade levels back for in-person learning 5 days a week. So we're looking forward to getting that update from the health department in the very near future so that we can make plans accordingly. Switching gears a bit, I also want to wish our boys basketball team luck. The boys basketball sectional will begin in the next week. So we wish all of our teams participating good luck as they move forward in that sectional. Also on Tuesday, that was match day from Enroll Indy, and so I also want to welcome all of our new families to IPS who received their enrollment match on Tuesday. We are very happy to have them join the IPS family or join their new school if they're moving up into the grades within the district. I saw lots of things on social media where folks are very excited to get that news on Tuesday. And then finally, I just do want to reiterate in our conversation about the budget that we do know that challenging decisions are ahead for our team and for this board, but that continuing to elevate our voices and the voices of our students and our families has never been more important. And I believe that with our thoughtfulness and intentionality regarding the decisions we make and the impact they will have on our students, that we will take that decision-making very seriously. And I want our community, our team, our families to know that we do understand the responsibility that we have as a team, that we will continue to be good stewards of our limited resources, and that we will center our students, that they deserve to be able to have the resources so that they can live the lives that they dream of living, and we will advocate for nothing less than that for them. And that's all my comments for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. And thank you all. So our next scheduled meeting will be our work session on Monday, March 15th at 6 p.m. at Arlington Middle School. Having completed all the agendas on the all the items on the agenda. Wow, it is 8:49, 8:50. Goodness gracious. The meeting stands adjourned.